Hi guys, this is Lauren with Lauren Watkins Art, and today I'm going to be painting some sun rays peeking through a darkened forest. For this painting, I am going to be using Fabriano Artistico paper. This is 100% cotton paper, which I really wanted to have a nice cotton paper for this painting because I'm going to be doing a lot of wet washes, and I want this paper to hold on to that moisture and allow me to do lots and lots of layering. This is a paper that is on a watercolor block, which means the edges are glued down so the paper is stretched for me so I don't need to use tape like what you normally see in my watercolor paintings. So I started off by just sketching out where I wanted a couple of the main trees to be, where the horizon line was, and then I started painting. And I pre-wet the paper really well. That way I had a lot of working time for these wet washes. And then I started going in with my quinacridone gold, and I started doing brush strokes that were very directional, so it looked like rays of light coming from the source where the sun is. And where I'm having kind of the sun be placed in this painting is on the upper left side, and you can see that's where it's kind of the whitest, and then the light kind of comes out from that section. And then after doing that and kind of blocking in some more gold colors at the base, I started going in with my green paints. And I followed the same kind of pattern of painting as I did with the quinacridone gold, where the green paints in the background followed the same directional pattern as the yellow brushstrokes, where it kind of all stems from the sun light source. And then as I moved down to the bottom of the paper and I was doing more of the grassy areas, then my brush strokes could kind of just follow normal grass patterns. And you've already seen me use it in this painting so far, but when I'm doing really wet into wet washes like this, I find having a paper towel in my opposite hand is really helpful in helping me be able to quickly blot up areas where I don't like how my paint is flowing, and it just lets me control my painting a little bit better. So keep that paper towel in your hand so that you can get control of a situation more quickly. So you can see I've layered up some more greens up in the sky, and now I'm adding a little bit more gold towards the bottom, and I'm just building up layers of paint. And once I finish adding this kind of gold color and some like oranges to the bottom, I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come in and start working on trees and background. It's really important to let your layers dry. I let that dry, and then I painted these 4 trees, and now I'm working on the really distant background. And you can see my brush strokes are still kind of following the angle of those rays of light. And again, that's just to kind of help keep it looking directional, like the light is shining through. And I'm using mixtures of greens and pale yellows, and wherever I want that light to be shining, I'm focusing mostly on the yellows. Then after I put some paint down, I am taking a paper towel and just kind of swiping it where I want the highlights to be the strongest. It's really important to kind of preserve the highlights because with watercolor, your white of your paper is your highlight. And so I'm just being really careful not to get this paper too dark too quickly. And now onto one of my favorite techniques I kind of figured out while I was painting it. Is it a new technique? No, but it's new to me. I started off by painting these background trees really light, so I diluted my browns a lot. And then as I painted them, anywhere that I wanted it to look like the rays of light were shining in front of the tree, I blotted it up with my paper towel. And so you can see these little gaps showing up on the trees, and that represents where the light is shining in front of it. And I'm making sure it lines up with the rays of light that I'd already established within the painting, and that's already creating a lot of depth. Also, having these trees be in the background, I don't want them to be in as dark of a value as the foreground trees. Things get lighter in value the further away they are, and so by having them lighter, it pushes them back visually and it allows the other trees to come forward. Another thing to do when painting a forested scene like this is to vary where the bottom of the tree lands. So trees that are further back are going to have brush and grass and other plants growing along the base, and so you won't see where they touch the ground. And so some of these trees are kind of floating above that horizon line we drew, while the trees that are closer to us sit below it. And so varying where the bottom of the tree hits will help create that depth. Now you'll see like little speckles that kind of showed up randomly. That's because I applied masking fluid to everywhere that I wanted to protect the highlights before I moved on to the next step of the painting. Masking fluid is like a rubber substance that you kind of add to your paper, let it dry, and then it protects everything below it. And it is really nice for situations like this where you really want to preserve your highlights, but you're also going to be doing lots of layers of paint over the top. Once that masking fluid dried, I started going in with more layers of paint to start adding more depth. And I'm adding some warm tones to this kind of grassy area. And I'm keeping cooler colors like blues and cool greens where I want it to look like it's in shadow and the light isn't shining on it. One of the things that stressed me out the most with this painting was figuring out how to paint the forest leaves on those trees to make it look like light was shining through them and creating that depth without it becoming a solid mass. And so this section kind of stressed me out a little bit. But I started off with a really diluted yellow-green, and I'm keeping my brush strokes kind of random, and I'm not doing all the same shape. And I'm also leaving little gaps between them because trees aren't a solid mass of leaves. There's little gaps between them, and I'm starting to block that in. And I did spray a tiny bit of water on it just to help it flow a little bit, and I focused that on the right side where the mass of leaves would be a little bit more dense. And then as I moved over to where I'm in front of the light source, I kept it lighter and a little bit more sporadic. When painting the underbrush under these trees, make sure you're keeping your brush strokes a little bit more vertical so it looks like the foliage is growing upright. And then just skip the sections where the highlights are shining in front of that foliage, and then go up to the next shadow area and add a little bit more foliage above that. So it's like you're painting a section, skip a section, paint above it. It's a little bit of a mind warp to try and process, but it was the only way I could find to make it look like those rays of light were growing in front of it without making it look like the plant is growing sideways. Then I let that paper dry completely. I then added masking fluid, and the next layer of masking fluid, I made sure I added some up in the leaves on the trees, focusing it where I wanted it to look like highlights were, or the sun rays were hitting the leaves, so it was going to be lighter in value. And I kept those dabs of masking fluid more leaf shape. And then where I added masking fluid along the grassy area at the bottom, I did more vertical strokes with the masking fluid so it would look like blades of grass. I even added a few strokes of masking fluid where I wanted to help protect the rays of light shining through the forest. And then I let that dry completely. You don't want to get your paper wet while you have wet masking fluid on, else you will not be able to remove the masking fluid. Now I'm going in and adding more shadows to help create more depth within this painting. If you are wanting to create the illusion of light shining through something, you have to add enough shadows to create that contrast so the light shows up. It's kind of like you can light a match during the day and it doesn't really feel like it's putting off that much light because everything around it is light. But if you light that match in a dark room at nighttime, then it's glowing and that light becomes a lot more noticeable. It's the same with this painting. I want those rays of light to really stand out within this picture. And so I need to make sure that the shadow areas have enough contrast that it allows that light to shine. The brush I'm using to add these shadow sections in is a dagger brush, and it's a flat paintbrush that's been cut at a really steep angle. And I love this brush for painting organic things like leaves and grasses and those kinds of shapes. I love it because it holds a lot of paint because it's a flat brush, but I can use it for teeny tiny details because of that sharp point. So I'm not constantly having to re-dip my paintbrush in my palette and reload it. Because of the sharp point and how thin that section is, I can use this brush to create long flowing strokes to kind of mimic grass, because the bristles are longer on that front point, it kind of wobbles if you press down, and so you can get really nice organic shapes. So it's just a really handy brush to use. And you can see we just had a big jump in the process of this painting. And all I did during that jump was the same thing we did before, where I let the paper dry, added masking fluid to anywhere I wanted to protect, let the masking fluid dry, and then did another layer of paint. So I'm gradually building up the details, I'm gradually building up the color saturation, and gradually building up the values, how light or dark things are. And as I'm building these layers, this painting is starting to come to life. When trying to capture light within your painting, it's really important to pay attention to where the light source is sitting in and how it affects the objects you're painting. Because we have trees that are being lit from behind, or it's called being backlit. And what happens is when things are being backlit, they end up actually being really, really dark in value because the sun around it is so bright. So these trees on the left-hand side and their leaves, so the trunks and the leaves, for the most part are going to be quite dark because the light is coming from behind and we're looking at their kind of shadowed side. Whereas the trees on the right-hand side of the painting are being lit from the side and kind of at an angle. And so on each of those individual trees, the trunk for the most part is going to be lighter on the left-hand side of the trunk and shadowed on the right-hand side. And then the leaves on those trees are going to be lighter at the top where the rays of light are hitting them, and then the underside of the leaves are going to be in shadow. And so paying attention to where the light's coming from, where it would actually hit, will make a big difference in how realistic your painting looks at the end. Something else I did to help create this sense of light within the painting was pay attention to the undertones of my colors. So is it a warmer color or is it a cooler color? And each color has a warm and a cool version. So like if you look at yellows, a cool yellow is a yellow that is closer to green on the color wheel. It's like those really lemony yellow colors, whereas a warmer yellow has a lot more orange undertones. And what I did in this painting was anywhere where I wanted it to feel like the sunlight was hitting it, I used warmer colors. I used yellows with more oranges in it. I used greens that had a lot more yellow to them just to help warm it up. And then anywhere that I wanted it to feel like it was in shadow and the sun wasn't shining on it, I used a lot more cooler colors. So I used greens with a lot more blues in them. I used straight up blue in the painting to help create that play on warm and cool colors. Now I'm going in with a rubber pickup tool. It's kind of this block of rubber, and I'm rubbing it on my paper, and that removes all the masking fluid off the paper. So you can see all of those sections that were protected by the masking fluid have now been removed. And so now I can go in and do my final details, adjust values, all those things, because I love masking fluid because it protects the white of the paper and highlighted sections, but it does prevent you from adding fine-tuned details because it creates this physical block. So by removing it, now I can go in and add fine details. I can tweak and adjust the values and just do the final finishing touches on this painting. One of the main things I need to adjust on this piece to really capture that feeling of light within the painting is to fix these rays of light. So some of these rays of light are getting narrower at the bottom when actually they should be getting wider. It's kind of like when you learn about one-point perspective, things are smaller the closer they are to your like reference point, and then as they get further away, they get bigger. And my rays of light are like that, or they should be like that. So to correct it within my piece, I need to do a lifting technique. And I'm going to do that by taking a stiff paintbrush. I'm going to use a filbert paintbrush for it. And I'm using a really stiff one because that allows me to activate those paints that are sitting on my paper and kind of bring them up. And then I can blot them with a paper towel. And that will lift that pigment off the paper and I'll bring back some of the highlights. Some colors lift better than others. Granulating colors tend to lift the best. But you can see I'm just taking my paintbrush, getting it wet and scrubbing at my paper, and then taking a paper towel and blotting it up. And you can see we're starting to get that hazy look to the painting. We're also widening out these rays of light so they're more prominent, they're getting wider, and so they're more believable. And by doing those kind of adjustments, the painting starts to come to life more. As you get towards the end of your painting, there's 3 things I recommend you do. 1, take a break. Coming back to your painting with fresh eyes is better at helping you realize what things need to be tweaked or adjusted. Sometimes we get frustrated with a painting, and it's because we've been staring at it for too long. And if you keep at it while you're frustrated, you're going to ruin your piece. So take a break and then come back at it with fresh eyes. Then look at it from a distance. So prop your painting up, look at it from a distance, take a step back, and that can really help you see what sections are like coming forward, what sections are receding, what values need to be adjusted, and then you can have a direction on what you need to do to tweak and adjust it. The third thing I recommend is taking a picture of it and desaturating it. So I'll take a picture on my phone and then I will go to the edit section and desaturate it. I don't use the preset black and white features because a lot of those preset filters have other things adjusting it like contrast and stuff. You don't want those to distort your piece. You just want to desaturate it, and then you can see what values within your painting need to be tweaked and adjusted. And that's what I'm doing right now on this piece. Is I had my phone out, I was looking at the desaturated version of the painting and then looking at what areas needed to be adjusted. So now I'm just doing those final details. I hope this video kind of helped teach you how to capture light within your painting. I'm already looking at this piece and I'm really proud of how it turned out, but I'm already looking at it and thinking, well, what could I do better? So I might be painting a whole series of sunlight hitting a forested scene, and I hope you'll stick around for it. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you have any questions about what you saw, please leave them down below, and I will see you next time. Bye.